Welcome back to Match Plot. The transfer window is closed, the squads are locked in, and now the big question is, did Coventry have a good window, or are we in trouble? Let's dive right in with the departures. You might be alarmed, but aside from the youth prospects, there were some key moves that will impact Coventry. Ben Sheaf, the big one, club captain, 173 appearances and off to Wrexham for £6.5 million. On paper it feels like a shock, but if you look closer it makes sense. Sheaf's had a run of injuries, his minutes were dropping, and with Matt Grimes arriving to dictate the games, his role was already reduced. He started the season on the bench and managed just 6 minutes before another injury. Talent-wise, yes, it's a huge loss, but consider the contract situation, the fee and the funds it brings in, £6.5 million is great business. Still, those 29 league appearances from last season now need to be covered somehow. Binks went earlier in the summer, £3 million to Bromby. He never quite hit the heights we hoped, and he wanted more game time, so he's already finding his feet there, so this one suits both sides. Brad Collins out on loan to Burton. A difficult spell here, confidence fell out of favour. This is a chance to reset and get him playing back regularly. Again, this move makes sense. Norman Bassette, another loan. This time, Rems, likely permanent. This one hurts a bit because, well, the potential was clear and it never quite clicked for him. He'd been out of the squad for some time, so whilst disappointing, it's not really a surprise, and probably best for both him and the club. And then finally, Rafa, a loan move to Wigan. On paper, again, this makes sense. Minutes in his legs, he's able to progress. He didn't really feature last season, but he just put in a man of the match performance against Luton and had moments in the Cup versus Millwall. That could be a really useful player as an impact player, however, his departure leaves us light out wide, and it feels like one we could regret. That said, we've made transfers of our own, with the arrival of Luke Woolfenden from Ipswich, Carl Rushworth on loan from Brighton, Kane Kesler-Hayden from Aston Villa, and Miguel Angel Brau from Granada. Whilst not mass quantity, the players that we have brought in have been smart acquisitions that, well, make sense. We've covered this in a previous video, however, as a recap, if we look back at the 24-25 season performance, Coventry created the second highest XG in the league and totaled 64 goals, with only 3 other teams outscoring the Sky Blues. We've carried that through to the new season and whilst there's been some calls for a new striker from some, the reality is our starting 11 is good moving forward. Defensively, however, our record was a bit, well, shaky. We conceded more than the expected goals against and certainly not giving our fans much confidence, even when sitting at 2-0 up. There were gaps that, well, needed filling, including bringing cover at right back to help Milan. He was expected to cover a lot of ground last season, and that expectation often led to fatigue and understandably impacting his performance, in particular on 3-game weeks. We conceded a lot of chances down the left-hand side and was often targeted by our opposition, and that needed addressing. And finally, resolve our goalkeeping issues. With Dovin out, replacements didn't cover themselves in glory, leading to conceding goals in low XG areas and with even some calamity mistakes in there. Plus, the departure of Binks, a quality replacement is needed to bolster that defence. Well, let's go through. Well, 1. Kesler-Hayden joined, offering a very good backup option to Milan, both similar in profile, very fast, very attacking fullbacks, and I can see both Milan and KKH having great seasons, pushing each other for better performances. 2. De Silva has stepped up, more solid this season and looking more positive. That said, Brau joins the club, and whilst there's limited data, there's been some positive showings. That said, questions defensively. However, we can allow some time to adapt to get used to English football. I'm certainly feeling a bit positive about this one longer term. 3. Rushworth certainly looked a top keeper. He's provided confidence to the back line in terms of structure and looks comfortable with his feet. He's had a few shaky moments this season already, however, he's still seeking match sharpness and adapting to our players, building those relationships, and that will make a lot of difference. He will no doubt be a solid addition. And 4. Replacing Binks. Well, we've done so with Woolfenden. He brings experience and solid defending. He's dubbed to have good positioning and reading of the game, which is a great positive to bring. Whilst being forced out of that Ipswich team, many of the Ipswich fans were unhappy with the decision to sell, commenting on Woolfenden as being one of their better centre-halves. One huge positive from this window, we've kept our stars. Rudoni, Wright, Milan, Thomas, they've all stayed. This is a settled starting 11 now, the same 11 that put 7 past QPR, and you can see they've stepped up this year building on that familiarity. But here's where the concern comes in: depth. Firstly, our midfield. The starting 11 are, well, nothing short of pure class, and that's been shown by the start of the season and how well they've interlinked. However, when we look at the bench, it starts to be a concern in terms of quality. Josh Eccles becomes the most obvious choice, in particular for a player as such as Victor Torp. Whilst they are different in play style, Eccles is a solid player. He has the ability to play longer and progressive passes, and much like Torp, has a great shot on him. He can also muck in defensively with some good work rate. That said, he's had injury problems himself and will need to get time up to match fitness and speed. Jack Rudoni, who offers a more forward role, can be swapped in for Victor Torp, who has played in this position to good effect when Rudoni was out last season. The main concern lies with Matt Grimes, a player who has become the heart of the team, being able to pick the ball up from the defence, even under pressure, keep the ball and ultimately drive the team forward. While Sheaf was not a like-for-like swap, Sheaf did have a lot of quality also, which has now been lost. And when you compare the type of player Grimes is to that of Jamie Allen, and even, Josh Eccles, it's going to have a major impact on the team. And as I say, without discrediting Eccles and Allen, it's more of a comment on the playstyle of Grimes. Andrews has looked bright from what we've seen, and Lampard clearly sees something in him. We've seen the progress he's made with Rudoni and Torp. That said, it's a big ask for Andrews, and with the step up to Championship football, he'll need to be nurtured. Bright spells, however, needs time to find his feet. Now I'm going to pull up an example where we saw a starting midfield of Grimes, Allen and Andrews versus a weakened Millwall, and they really struggled to get into the game. Allen and Andrews were very passive and were overpowered by a tough Millwall midfield. It often led to them being bypassed and putting a lot of strain on Grimes and the back line, and this led to some questionable defensive positioning from a lot of the back line in order to compensate. When we did get the ball, Jamie Allen was neat and tidy, however the passes were often short and safe and not offering penetration. Nearly 50% of those passes were backwards. It often led to the defence bypassing the midfield entirely and looking long to the front line. Whilst Andrews has great promise, he'll no doubt develop throughout the season. However, at current it's a big ask to fill the shoes of Torp, Rudoni or Grimes. During that Millwall game, Grimes, to no surprise, outdid everyone with 113 touches, a fairly typical Grimes-esque performance. However, you can see the struggle of Jamie Allen and Kai Andrews to get involved in the game, with Rudoni coming on as sub, managing 32 touches in 30 minutes, and Torp managing 22 in 20 minutes. As soon as they came on, they were able to get a hold of the game and control the midfield again. Our forward line has similar depth issues, with Wright establishing himself as the lead striker and performing well. We're left with only two recognised wingers, leaving the only replacement a shoehorn Thomas Asante. Perhaps taking some credit away from Thomas Asante there, as whilst it's not his favourite position, he has done very well this season out on that right hand side. He's well suited to drifting inside, and it's well suited to the team when we can hold dominance in possession. Defensively, however, it's a big ask for him. Wright, as we know, can play on the left, however, looking at his current form at centre forward, it's not ideal to be pulling him away. On the surface, we do have options, and we have the bonus of fluidity throughout the player positioning. However, if we run into injuries, we may need to rethink our playstyle, or at the very least our formation. I think the issue sits with me is the ability to use our subs to change the game. Our starting 11 pretty much picks itself. I've previously used Leeds as an example, last year being able to switch players at will if the game isn't going their way. For instance, if the trickery of Noto was falling flat, they could bring on a pace merchant in Dan James, and it gives the opposition team new challenges. Granted, we're talking different budgets, however, with Coventry it just feels like we've shown our hand from the off. No doubt we're packed with quality in that starting 11, I just want a player or two who could change the dynamic of the game if it's not going our way. I've had a few questions if I think we will persist with the 4-3-3 or if we'll move to a 3-5-2, and I still think that Lampard will continue with that 4-3-3. The system in place works well, there's good structure, and so far it's worked. We're creating a lot of chances, and at the moment we're taking them. And defensively, we're limiting chances for the opposition in open play. Some work on set pieces, but perhaps a discussion for another video. The downside is what we saw during the Oxford game, where we started to look a little leggy in the second half and our usual press and shape faded, allowing Oxford in. And that was a little hint at how shallow our squad depth is, not wanting to risk Sheaf with an injury with his transfer in discussion, and with other players returning from injury, it wouldn't allow us to keep our high energy play. With Eccles and Sakamoto returning, we should see that somewhat alleviated. That said, I would expect to see a 3-5-2 at some point during this season, with injuries and suspensions being, inevitable. Whilst it takes away our dangerous wingers, it does allow more freedom in our wing-backs, potentially alleviating their defensive work, in particular for Brau whilst he adapts. It would raise new tactical challenges, such as Grimes dropping deep to collect the ball. However, you could certainly see it suiting Sims, who seems to work better in that two-striker system. There are pros and cons to changing the system, but at current I think we'll see the 4-3-3 remain. Looking ahead, September is a tough month of fixtures, and we will need to continue to secure points to stay on track to where we want to be. We're used to slow starts and, we've started well for a change, albeit against winnable fixtures, but it's good for the mindset moving forward. We have a small squad, yes, joint smallest in the league with West Brom, but we have a lot of quality, and there are advantages to working within a smaller group, being able to share game time without having challenging conversations or disjointedness in the camp. Time will tell. A final comment just on club finances. I think it can be easy to look at other clubs and perhaps worry about the movement they're making, particularly some of the clubs with bigger moves this window: Birmingham, Wrexham, Sheffield United, lots of players coming in. The level of spending is just not in our club's nature. They have needed a big injection to get players in to compete, and yes, after their signings they are looking strong. However, we already have a strong and familiar squad. We've recruited carefully in the right areas, and while some areas are lean, we still have a very strong squad that will be a strong challenger for the league. Let's not forget, we made the biggest signing of the season, our home, the CBS Arena. And whilst it can't start right wing, it certainly will play a part in driving the team forward to where we need to be. That's it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. A bit of a break now until our next match preview, looking ahead versus Norwich. If you want to support the channel, give me a subscribe or follow me on socials. And if you'd like to go even further, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee page that you can support. All the best. Cheers, guys.